Hello, welcome to the Hispanic Patriot Podcast, a weekly edition of news and commentary brought to you by Nicholas Razzo, my fearless compatriot, and myself, your Hispanic Patriot Podcast founder, Hugo Chavez Ray. We are deep behind enemy lines in a hidden, undisclosed location here in the woods in Colorado. We are broadcasting to you, and we have some great information for you tonight. So let's get right into the topics tonight. Our intrepid co host will be joining us shortly. He's having a few technical difficulties, but we'll have him shortly. Um, so, uh, the the topic of the night is the upcoming state central committee meeting this Saturday that will be held in an undisclosed location in Aurora, Colorado. So, for those of you that don't know, if you're not in Colorado, this is Colorado news, Colorado Republican Party news. But we have a opportunity under our bylaws and our state laws to opt out of what is known as open primaries here in the state. This situation was foisted upon us by Proposition 108 back in 2017 when there was a referendum on the ballot and it was voted in where it allowed people that were not registered for either the Democrat or the Republican Party to vote in one or the other's primaries, which means basically people who were not affiliated with either party would be allowed to vote on our candidates, which as Republicans we have always opposed, and a lot of Democrats have also opposed. But the situation is that we are bound by law every 2 years to vote on the issue. And this Saturday, the Central Committee is going to be meeting for that purpose because it has to be done before October the 1st. So I want to go over a few factual information for those of you who are on the Central Committee that may be tuning in. And obviously for some of you who are not part of the Central Committee but want to know what's going on with the party. This is important stuff. So the situation is that the question is, why does the CRC, the Colorado Republican Committee, Central Committee, why they must carry out the Assembly and Convention's opt-out resolution? Now, for those of you that don't know the process, we have an assembly every 2 years. And last year, we had an assembly where the body, the state assembly, voted almost unanimously to instruct the state central committee, which is meeting this Saturday, to vote to opt out of the open primaries. Okay. In order to do that, it requires a 75% threshold to be cleared, which is outrageous in and of itself because that was put in there for the purposes of trying to basically, quash any attempts to opt out. Because honestly speaking, I've been a member of the Republican Party for over 45 years. I've never been to anything where 75% agreed on anything. So that's kind of the first thing. The second thing is, why is this happening? Well, I believe, and a lot of other Republicans believe, that the whole idea was put forth in order to have Republican candidates in primaries be selecting what we would consider weak candidates, so that when they went on to the general election, the Democrats would have an easier path to victory. Well, up until now, it's been working like a charm because we haven't won an election statewide since this came down the pike. So, and ask yourself, if this was a diabolical plan by the Democrats, by the left, to basically, keep power in perpetuity. So we Republicans that are conservative and grassroots have been fighting this, and we continue to fight. Now, on the other side of this coin, this proposition, which, by the way, is unconstitutional, um, is being challenged in the courts right now as we speak. However, that resolution may not come in time for this coming primary in 2026. So we have to take this vote before October 1st by law. So that's why we're meeting this Saturday to vote on that issue. But here's something that I want to read. I have this in my formerly nicotine-stained fingers, this document. It says, close the open primary via opt-out order of the Colorado GOP State Assembly and Convention. Recognizing that the Colorado Republican State Assembly and Convention has the ultimate authority, that's key, to provide rules that shall govern the State Central Committee, which is the group meeting this Saturday, in accordance with CRS 1-3-106, 2. The Colorado Republican State Assembly and Convention hereby orders the Colorado Republican State Central Committee to affirmatively opt out of all open primaries in perpetuity, starting with the 2026 election cycle, which is the one coming up next year, in accordance with CRS 1-4-702, while further ordering that any negative votes intended to prevent the passage of the opt-out shall not be counted in the denominator of any vote, as well as not counting those members voting in the negative as part of the total membership of the Colorado Republican State Central Committee for purposes of the opt-out vote. The State Central Committee chairman shall call for the opt-out vote as soon as practicable, while being empowered with all reasonable authority to enforce this order. This order may only be rescinded by a future Colorado Republican State Assembly and Convention. So, to break that down, what it means is the State Assembly, which is the ultimate authority in the party, has ordered basically the State Central Committee, which is meeting this Saturday, to vote to opt out of the open primary. There really isn't any discretion, and we'll talk about that a little bit down the line. First, let's talk about some facts, okay? As I just mentioned, the supreme authority of the Assembly and Convention, the state party bylaw is Article 13, Section H, CRS 1-3-106, and People X relating Lowry versus District Court 1903. The State Assembly and Convention is the supreme governing body of the Colorado Republican Party. On April 6, 2024, 2,000 plus delegates, over 90% majority, voted to order the CRC to opt out of Colorado's semi-open primary system beginning in 2026. The Assembly speaks with final authority. The CRC is bound to act. So that's step one. People are saying, well, the state assembly shouldn't dictate to the central committee. Well, they're ignoring the law. They're ignoring the bylaws.
Like that's how we set it up, as it turns out.
Exactly. That is the rule. That's how we govern. Now, if people want to fight in the future and try to change that bylaw and change that edict, they're free to do so. But I doubt they'll be successful. So that's step one. Number two, the CRC's role after the vote. So wait, let me back up just a minute. So basically what I just pointed out to you is that this meeting on Saturday is nothing more than a formality, because every delegate that goes to this meeting on Saturday is bound to vote in the affirmative by order of the State Assembly and Convention. Okay. If you don't do that, you are in dereliction of your duty as a bonus member and or officer in the party at the State Central Committee meeting this Saturday, September 27th.
I would like to make a point on that I just noticed that I think it's interesting that from a group of people who are suggesting that the primary will be more closed off and oligarchical and less inclusive, that this group wants the proper body to not have their say and instead have the decision kind of be decided by an insular group of people. It seems a little bit hypocritical to me, is all, that the insular group of people is totally fine if they agree with what you agree with, but if the people vested with the authority to do so, and you don't agree with that, then suddenly they're an oligarchy that's controlling the party and trying to disenfranchise people.
Well, in my opinion, okay, my retort to that argument would be everything that is argued after the fact is moot because the ruling has already been made. So it would be like, I don't know, let's see if this is a good analogy. Let's say the US Supreme Court hands down a ruling that says this is the way this law should go. And then somewhere along the line, some lower court somewhere decides, no, we're going to have our own hearing and we're going to decide for ourselves that which way we want to go.
But Hugo, Democrats do that all the time.
Yeah, that's true. We're Republicans, though. Okay.
I think that makes the point in comparison very clear, though.
Yeah. So here's where we are. Okay. All the arguments to the contrary are moot. Okay. Anybody that says that they don't approve of the opt-out process and they vote in the negative is in dereliction of their duty as a Central Committee member and should be removed from the Central Committee in accordance with the bylaws.
And so I wanted to make one counter argument, Hugo, that anyone at this point would say, well, Hugo, what if we want to make a vote in the negative and we say that that's the meeting that we want to do that in? Because you said that there would have to be, of course, they would have to wait for not a state Central Committee meeting, but as you said, a state assembly. But let's say they don't want to wait for that. That argument would still also be moot because even if they wanted to do that, the affirmative would have to be done first. As in, if they wanted to challenge the opt-out, they would first have to legitimize themselves by voting for it. Is that sort of what you're saying?
Sort of, but the bottom line is...
Because there are going to be people who oppose the opt-out. We do acknowledge that.
The bottom line is the State Central Committee has no authority to override what the State Assembly has done.
That's the whole point.
Okay? Again, go back to the analogy. It'd be like a lower court saying, we're going to override what the U.S. Supreme Court said.
You can challenge it later on, but you still have to follow the Supreme Court. You still have to follow it even if you wanted to challenge it.
Well, you'd have to have another case that makes its way up to the Supreme Court and
go back to the process.
And go back through the process. And if a different ruling is issued then sure. But this is the same process. Here, the State Central Committee, if there's a body of people that say, well, we don't agree with that, that would be, in this case, a very small minority. The next time we have an assembly, if they're delegates and they went to the assembly and presented their case for the body to consider, the body could then again vote again based on what the argument may be. Okay.
They could in theory vote back the status quo as much as they wanted, but if they don't first do what is required by the bylaws, then we kind of have a wild west. We have a circus instead of a party if we do that.
Yeah. And if the sitting chair refuses to abide by what the state assembly has done, she is in violation of her oath as chair, and she can be removed because she will then have broken the bylaws, and it is for lack of a better term, an impeachable offense. Okay. So people like myself could then file for removal of the chair based on her dereliction of duty. And by the letter of the law, the body should vote to remove her because she violated the bylaws of the committee. So that's basically where we are now. We're going to have some contentions, I'm sure. Um, the other there's some other things that are coming up that I'm not going to address here because some of them are, um, I would say, private at the moment. We don't want to let the cat out of the bag as to what may be coming at the meeting itself. So we'll skip over that part. But here's the CRC's role after the vote. Okay. The resolution ordered by the CRC to affirmatively opt out under CRS 1-4-702. Okay. That's a fact. Number two, the CRC's role is implementation only. There is no room for debate or delay. Okay? So it's not like we're going in there to debate the issue. The issue has been settled. The duty of the State Central Committee is to abide by what the Assembly and Convention did. There's no other alternative. Okay? And that's by rule. And then their duty is mechanical certification notice to the Secretary of State by October 1st, 2025. And that's been up in the discussion as to who would carry that. I mean, typically and traditionally, it's the party chair that would carry that to the Secretary of State's office and say, we have voted to opt out and we will conduct our own primary. That's their notice by law by October 1st of 2025, which is Wednesday. So that's where we are. Now, let's discuss a little bit about the ministerial versus discretionary duties. Okay. Ministerial act means a law that prescribes what must be done with no judgment involved. Okay. This is where we are.
That's very hard for people these days, Hugo, to do something with no judgment involved.
Well, when I say no, I'm not saying we get into people's heads and they don't have judgments. What I'm saying is, by law, they have no recourse. Okay, they have to do, if they're a Central Committee member, they have to do what the convention and assembly said. That's it. There is no wiggle room. So a ministerial act is a duty performed by a public official that involves little to no discretion or personal judgment, requiring only the obedience to instructions or laws. These acts are characterized by their straightforward, prescribed nature and are often contrasted with discretionary acts, which involve more independent thought and decision making. Examples include the preparation of ballots, the recording of documents, and mechanical processing of tax returns. The opt-out directive is now ministerial. CRC cannot substitute its judgment. That's clear as day. This is black and white. I'm not making this stuff up, folks. This is real. Okay, this is the letter of the law. People say, well, we're a body of laws. We're a nation of laws. Well, let's abide by the laws. Okay?
Well, there we go, Hugo. Where could people find the information that you're working off of so that nobody has any excuses?
This sheet has been distributed to Central Committee members. So if people pay attention to their emails, they should have it. People that are not members of the Central Committee have not received these documents, obviously for obvious reasons, because we need it floating around there for the media to be trying to disseminate. So again, let's get back to why the CRC has no discretion. Number one, the Assembly resolved the controversy and issued a binding order. Number two, the CRC acknowledged the directive in its March 29, 2025 minutes, which was this past March at the State Central Committee meeting where we elected new officers. Okay. So if you look at the minutes, if you can go back to the minutes, and it was acknowledged at that time. The only steps left are certify the opt-out and notify the Secretary of State. And refusal means disenfranchisement of 2,000 plus delegates in favor of 520 State Central Committee members. So that's it. So there's a clash possible. I'm fairly certain that the majority of the State Central Committee is in agreement with the State Assembly. Okay, by how much, I don't know. I mean,
well, then the question I want to ask, though, as a political analyst, Hugo, is that what is this a factional vote? Because I think a lot of people would consider if it is, then a clash is inevitable. But this is not purely factional. This is, in fact, the letter of the law. How much of the State Central Committee, who you might say are not necessarily part of a faction that would support the opt out automatically, how many of those people do you think are principled people who would go against
well, I would say
what their faction or kind of group
you're breaking up a little bit, but here's I would say that there
would
is a
desire?
portion of the State Central Committee that are, letter of the law type people, and if they don't like something, that's okay, but they will go with the letter of the law. Now, as I mentioned earlier, there is recourse, there is consequences for any member who refuses to abide by the letter of the law. I, as a member, if I had a list of people who refused to abide by the letter of the law, I could challenge everyone. I could charge every one of them with dereliction of duty and put their name up for removal from the State Central Committee. Then there would have to be a special meeting and a vote to remove those people. So that's a fight I don't want to get into.
Yeah, no, that seems like a lot of trouble. I think people would rather just not do that at all.
Right. But here's the consequences of refusal are the delegates' binding vote is nullified until 2026, which would be too late for the primary. And number two, irreparable harm to the party's governing process would occur. So it's what we would call in the U.S. a constitutional crisis, basically.
Yeah.
This is a bylaws crisis that would be created by people who are rebels who think they know more and basically want their cake and eat it too. Okay. There are people like that in the party, unfortunately. Okay. And they're going to jump up and they're going to scream and shout and they're going to say, no, this isn't right. This isn't fair. Then what's the purpose of having the Central Committee if the State Assembly can have governance over us? Well, I didn't make the bylaws. Okay. I didn't create the laws. Okay, so you want to argue with somebody, don't argue with me, argue with who created the bylaws. And if you disagree with the bylaws, there's only one remedy, and that is to amend the bylaws at the proper time and place. This Saturday is not the proper time and place. The Central Committee does not have the authority to amend bylaws. So somebody's going to jump up, I'm sure, with a resolution. They're going to say, well, we resolve to abolish the ruling of the State Assembly and Convention.
So you can't do that, yeah.
Okay, and my response to that is, okay, show me in the bylaws where you have the authority to do that. Just show me.
To me, it's interesting because, of course, there's far more influence. Like, there's more individuals who are behind that opt-out vote at the State Assembly than there are Central Committee members. That's true, right? So it was a larger group that agreed we want to opt out. Is that fair to say?
Over 2,000 at the State Assembly, and you were there.
But wait a minute. I was told that the anti-opt-out people were anti-opt-out because they didn't want to disenfranchise more voters. There seems to be a contradiction here. There seems to be a major contradiction.
It doesn't matter why they're anti-opt-out. What matters is what was voted in.
Oh, of course.
Over 90% voted to opt out. And they directed the State Central Committee on this time, which is this Saturday, to opt out. They gave a direct order. And the state central committee has no wiggle room. They have to do what the state assembly says. So if we have a certain number of people who decide they're going to try to go rogue, well, then we're going to have a constitutional crisis, like I said.
Well, and that's the point that we're hammering home, because honestly, that's the most important point. That is the most important point above everything that you see here, you hear here, because we just don't want more conflict in the party, folks. We're the ones saying, let's get together, let's do the right thing. And I think that should be very clear.
Yep. So the courts, finally, the courts have clear authority to compel the CRC compliance via what's known as mandamus, which is a direct order from the court that says you, the body of the Central Committee, must abide by your authority. And so if this goes to court, the court can say state assembly rules and governs, and the Central Committee failed in their duties. Therefore, everything they did at this September 27th meeting is null and void, and the state and what gets placed into action is the state assembly. Now, how that would affect the deadline with the Secretary of State, I don't know. But I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not sure how that would be challenged. But
I'm sure it could be done, though. It wouldn't make it impossible.
Of course, because the state central committee would be acting out of the bounds of their authority. So therefore, if I would be what's known as a person who has standing because I'm a member of the state central committee and I'm a county party officer, I could go and file a lawsuit and say, Judge, these people violated the law according with our bylaws, and we move for a mandamus order to compel the party to opt out and notify the Secretary of State. It would be a simple case. There wouldn't be there's not much you can argue. I mean, you can't argue, well, I don't agree with that body back in 24, so we're going to do our own thing. Well, it doesn't work that way. I'm sorry.
Yeah, there's a past, present, future thing going on here, because I think people honestly just only think in the present. They don't really think about the future consequences. So we're just asking, our fellow SCC members, just think of the future consequences. If your case really is the best, then that will play itself out at a later date. But what we have to do on the date we have to do it is the right thing. And that is true whether it's September 27th or November 6th, November 10th for Democrats. Democrats vote on November 10th. Remember that. But, so whatever day it is to do the right thing, that is when you are expected to do the right thing. And if you truly are convicted in your beliefs, then they can only be made worse by not doing the right thing. Exactly. I think that's very baby first lessons, but we always have to remind people of them.
And so we'll close with this bottom line. The April 6, 2024 Assembly resolution removed all CRC discretions, okay? That CRC is the same as SCC, okay? The meeting this Saturday is governed by this ruling, and opting out is a ministerial duty, a simple mandatory act that must be carried out immediately. So we're going to leave it there. We will report back on the fireworks for this coming Saturday. Hopefully, it won't be real fireworks.
Hopefully, they'll just be celebratory and everything will go functionally well, and we'll all leave by noon.
Yep.
I'll find some wood. I'll find some wood after the show to knock on.
Absolutely. Well, the meeting supposedly opens at 9. There is some other business that has to be taken care of. One of those is my petition that was postponed from the last Central Committee meeting. So there are 3 items on there that will be heard. I don't know if she'll hear them before the opt-out vote or after, so we'll see. But yeah,
and we're not telling you AM or PM either. So it's not your job to know when or where or whatever. You don't need to know. What you do need to know is that Hispanic Patriot Podcast is your best source for this behind-the-scenes information. There is literally no other show out there in Colorado, as far as we know, that has the access that we do. So we appreciate you guys. always watching us, liking, subscribing. Please, if you haven't done that already, please take a moment to do so and leave us a comment to let us know what kind of things that you'd love to hear from us. And Hugo, good to see you, honestly. I had a power surge in my apartment right before the show, but we got online just in the nick of time.
Somebody, the forces of evil have located you. We have to shield you better.
No, I don't think that the utilities company is that bad. Luckily, the rates aren't as bad as ComEd back in Chicago. I'll tell you what. But the thing is, we are happy always to see you guys because we really do enjoy bringing you this stuff. It is awesome. We appreciate. Wouldn't want any other job in the world.
All right. Let's move on to our next topic, and that is what we call the Charlie Kirk assassination effect. Okay. As you probably know from last week to today, we saw the perp being arraigned in court, where he was formally charged, and given all the charges that are against him and what the possible consequences are. So let's move over here to this little video that I got. We're not going to play the whole thing. We're going to just show you a little bit tidbits about what actually took place.
Mr. Robinson, for count 1, aggravated murder, a capital felony in violation of Utah Code annotated 76-5-202, in that on September 10th, 2025 in Utah County, the defendant, Tyler James Robinson, intentionally or knowingly caused the death of Charlie Kirk under the following circumstances. The defendant knowingly created a great risk of death to another individual other than Charlie Kirk and the defendant. Notice conviction of this offense may carry the death penalty or pursuant to Utah Code 76-3-207.7, a mandatory term of imprisonment for life without parole or an indeterminate term of not less than 25 years, and that may be for life. Victim targeting enhancement in violation of Utah Code annotated 76-3-203.14 sub 2. Tyler James Robinson intentionally selected Charlie Kirk because of Tyler James Robinson's belief or perception regarding Charlie Kirk's political expression. Notice if the trier of fact finds beyond a reasonable doubt that the victim targeting enhancement applies, the sentencing judge or the Board of Pardons and Parole shall consider the defendant's selection of the victim as an aggravating factor. Violent offense committed in the presence of a child aggravating factor, the sentencing judge or the Board of Pardons and Parole shall consider as an aggravating factor in their deliberations that the defendant committed a violent criminal offense in the presence of a child. Count 2. Felony discharge of a firearm.
You are witnessing here our ABC News Live coverage. This is the first appearance in court, virtually you can see, which is how they do it. In this particular jurisdiction, Tyler James Robinson, the suspect, charged with aggravated murder among the 7 counts revealed late this afternoon. The judge is now reading those counts to the suspect. He nodded his head, understanding that the charges would be read to him. He was told he can have representation. The county attorney saying Robinson will face those 7 charges, including aggravated murder, obstruction of justice, and witness tampering.
Well, I think that the way that I read this assassin, I got choice words, but I'll resist, is kind of the kind of person that I used to see in my textbooks when I would read about the anarchists who would kill, people like Empress Zita or President McKinley. These are people who basically believe that they're soldiers in a cause, and if they die in the service of it, then, you can almost see kind of a demented glee in his eyes to a certain degree, but also realizing where exactly he's ending up. This is a person I don't think has much remorse. I don't believe he does. That's just my personal opinion.
Well, to me, he looks kind of in a zombie state. He's not all there.
He's accepted death to a large degree, and that's what I see in his eyes.
But he did want to get away. He wasn't one of those that...
Yeah, he didn't want to end up in the position he's in.
Yeah. He was not one of those that was going to take his life after he did the act. He could have done that on the roof. But when he had this exchange with his lover, basically he admitted as much. Said, I didn't plan it this way. I hoped to get away, and I'm paraphrasing here, but this is kind of what I got
No,
out
that's
of it.
about right. Yeah. And I want to make a point that people are making the argument that, oh, this text message seems inauthentic. Who talks to each other this way? Absolutely, gay theater kids talk to each other this way. They absolutely, oh, my love, this is exactly how the kind of person who would do this would talk to their gay lover. This is exactly how these people would talk. I was convinced right away. It's like, yeah, no, this is. You ever hear these people in the lunchroom when you were a kid? Yeah, this is what they act like.
Yep. And also, well, I grew up in a different era.
Yeah, not you. I meant more my generation. That's really, Hugo, I want to actually get a little bit of your input on this because it's true. My generation has seen the kind of kids that Tyler Robinson is our whole lives. And we always knew something was up with those kind of kids. And I'm not talking about nerdy kids or kind of spurgy kids. That everyone knows what the difference is. But there's a couple of kids that just got something really wrong about them. They go too far in things. They seem ready to attack people. They seem ready for violence. This kind of character, this very dark, almost satanic-like character, was that someone that you had growing up in your schools? The kind of people that do the Columbine shooting, those kind of guys.
Absolutely not. We had what was known. Well, we had what was known as the heads, the geeks, the mods, and the jocks. Okay, those were the four main groups.
Even I know those, but do you want to kind of give a primer for our younger audience?
Well, the heads were the younger hippie generation of which I was a part. Then you had the mods, the ones that kind of dressed with the groovy style of the day.
They were disco, baby.
My parents never. This was pre-disco. My parents never allowed me to dress that way. It was kind of cool dressing and stuff. I mean, I wasn't into it, but some were, and that's what it was. And then you had the geeks, of course, who were the nerds and the ones that are studious and you walked around with horn rimmed glasses and pen pocket pen savers.
The whole bit.
Yeah, the whole young bit. And then the jocks. They all wore their leather jackets and walked around and strutted through the halls and all the girls grew.
You see, in our schools, Hugo, these days there's like 10 subgroups to each of those nowadays.
Oh, I'm sure.
And some of them get really dark. Some of them get really dark and get kind of evil because there's sort of a rebelliousness towards not just the school and everybody in it, but there's almost a belief of I'm better than these people. You definitely saw this in the Columbine shooting. Just listen to how these kids talked. Listen to what they said to people who believed in God or who were black. And look at the Evergreen shooting. We had Jewish kids targeted. We had the Minnesota shooting. This was Catholic kids targeted. There's this kind of hatred has actually existed in our generation, and we've always felt very scared or like difficult to talk about it. But now we're not scared to talk about it at all. Unfortunately, it's because they're killing people.
And then we also had our, I neglected the one group, which was what we called the outlaws. Basically, like think the Fonz and the leather jackets and all the guys that were walking around strutting.
But even ironically, they had a group. Ironically, these kids these days are literally loners on the internet.
But I can honestly say, okay, now I went to parochial school for 8 years, and then I went to military school for 2 years, and then I went to public school for 2 years. So here's what happened is I can honestly say I don't recall anybody in my school years that was gay. Okay, now that doesn't mean they weren't there. I'm just saying they were not, I guess for lack of a better term, they were not out of the closet. Okay, if there were there, I couldn't point them to you because they were not
They didn't make
obvious.
it part of who they were.
Yeah, it wasn't obvious as to who was. And like my wife says, hey, they've been around forever, yeah, but they weren't out in the open when I was in school.
They weren't
And
recruiting either, certainly.
oh, no, definitely not recruiting. But if anybody did, I think I remember a couple of incidents where some people were trying to act out, and they got their comeuppance because that's the way it was handled back then. Okay, I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just telling you how it was
At that place, at that time.
At that place, at that time. It's different times, different situations. So basically, my school years cannot relate to this generation or even the last couple of generations. When my kids were in school, I don't even remember it being that big of an issue when they were in school. And this was, like my son was in high school in the late 80s, early 90s. My daughter didn't. My daughter's 4 years younger, so she was later 90s. But I do not recall this type of mentality and things going on in the schools.
Well, you know what, Hugo? I just realized what the biggest difference is, and you might agree. It's the internet.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, that's really like we might trace the downfall of the state of Colorado to when we got this system. I think we can kind of trace the extremity, the radicalization to the level we have to the generations that had full unfettered access to the internet.
Yeah, we didn't have social media. We had just social time. We interacted in person. And my kids didn't have social media, so thank God I dodged that bullet.
See, in my generation particularly was a hybrid generation. We had real life stuff and we had online stuff, and there was a place for both of that. But the kids today, Hugo, like a topic we'll be getting to is the kind of kid that shot up that ICE facility. These are people who are perpetually living in a world of their own creation. So when they go out into the real world from the internet, they really believe that they're bringing themselves, their real selves, their online selves, into the real world. This is how they really be. Yeah. So I really feel that the online space is not, benign in that sense, but I wouldn't judge people by it. What they do in real life determines who they are as people. And so if I had to give, I think you would agree with me, Hugo, one piece of advice for our young friends: do things in real life, get off the internet as much as you can, and form a brotherhood or a sisterhood and do things in real life, because it'll really, it's a lot better.
Well, my son has a 14-year-old, and he's not allowed to have a phone and social media. He is totally blocked from that, and I'm sure he's exposed to some of it at school, but he doesn't have a phone like 90% and 99% of these kids out there have. And
well, he's got parents that care,
yeah, well, they do, and there are other parents as well that care. But that's really the answer. These kids should not be getting phones at 9 and 10 years old, and then
certainly not going into gay communist chat rooms about it.
Exactly. So anyway, there's something before we get off the Charlie Kirk effect. There was something I wanted to share that kind of touched my heart. And this was something that took place at the Charlie Kirk Memorial this past Saturday. So let's watch. It's just real brief, but it's something that I thought was kind of poignant. Okay, now what you just saw there was a young lady who was standing as Assistant Director, FBI Director Dan Bongino was leaving the arena, and she called him over and she gave him a memento, which was a homemade little Jesus for protection. And he took, as you saw, he took the time to give her the time to say hello and thank her. But that's the kind of thing that happened at that memorial. I watched that memorial, and I tell you, it was just, I used a lot of tissues that day to tell you that. because that was the most amazing thing that I've ever seen. And several other people alluded to that they had never seen an event like that. Estimates are as high as 300,000 that attended. 70,000 were in one arena, 60,000 were in an adjacent arena, and the rest were out in the open parking lot where they had set up large screens. So, and it was all peaceful. It was all about Jesus, and everybody. A lot of the commentators commented this, and meaning that when George Floyd died or was killed, cities burned. When Charlie Kirk was killed, we prayed and we came together in unity and love, and that's the difference between the two sides. I don't care, people can whine all day long about conservatives being hateful and all, but I think the evidence is clear as to who's really full of hate. And
oh yeah, they showed it to us, and I actually shout out to Metatron, a great Maltese conservative patriot. He made the point. It's like, we aren't the ones that made Charlie a martyr. It was you guys. You're the ones who shot him. You're the ones who danced on his grave. You're the ones who did more work than the conservatives to make him into a symbol by what you did and your actions to it. And there's also something I wanted to say personally that about the memorial. Amazing Grace has become kind of the unofficial anthem, I think, of a lot of the grieving, because I've heard it so often. And I actually think it's very poignant for a reason a lot of people may not know. His good friend Ethan, I won't go, shout out to Ethan, you know who you are, used to sing that song for Charlie on trips or Turning Point events and stuff like that. So, Charlie was always a very musical person, and he liked musical accompaniment, and there's been a lot of great musical tributes to him. But that's a little factoid for all of you.
Well, I can say honestly that I cannot listen to that song without tearing up. Okay,
Now we have a new reason to.
That's the one that really gets to me. And when they opened up with the bagpipes doing that song, I lost it. So anyway, now in keeping with my edict about being truthful and honest, I want to give credit where credit is due. Now, I want to play something from a guy that we have criticized quite a bit. This is a Democrat, and I think it's going to shock people to hear what this guy said about Charlie Kirk. Let's just go to that clip.
Can this be a turning point for the U.S.? Thank you, Congressman Green.
I did not know Mr. Kirk. I don't believe I've ever met him. I meet a lot of people, so I may have, but I don't believe that I have. But here's what I know about him. He was a human being. He was a child of the same creator that created me. He had every right to express his views. He had every right to differ with me as much as he wanted to, and anybody else. He had every right to be where he was and to speak on the issues of importance to him in ways that I might not agree with. But he had a right to do this. He had a right to life.
Can this be a...
Now,
isn't that something?
That grabs you. That I had to play that because, Democrats have gotten a bad rap, but that's the only Democrat that I know of that actually spoke the truth.
And principally, too. I mean, he is a man. He literally was sitting there. I don't know if anyone didn't see or didn't know what that image above him was. That was a picture of him waving his cane at Donald Trump as a point of, me and this guy, Donald Trump, are not friends at all, do not agree with each other, but we stand with Charlie Kirk today. That was a beautiful message.
This is a guy that has filed articles of impeachment against President Trump 2 or 3 times. And
so what's everybody else's excuse?
So, yeah. So, I mean, look, I don't like the guy. I don't agree
Hey,
with it.
I like him in that moment. I'll tell you
In that moment, that's what I said. I have to give credit where credit is due. That goes to show that we are honest in our assessments, regardless of who the person may be. And in this instance, I think he showed his humanity, and I think that's important.
He absolutely did. Yeah,
that's important to point out, because of who it came from. So
anyway,
we're going to move on. This was our Charlie Kirk Effect moment for today. One thing that in breaking news, as you probably already know, there was an ICE detention under attack in Dallas. And
the left-wing insurgency continues, unfortunately.
Yep. And we're going to hear Director Holman talk about that.
Standing by. First, let's go to Brooke Taylor reporting from Dallas. Brooke.
Hi, Harris. Well, first, we have new information right now coming in from the FBI Director Kash Patel, who says that officials have been working around the clock 24/7 to go through this shooter's phone and find a possible motive. And what they found is pretty shocking.
A possible motive? I don't need to look at his phone to know his motive.
Want to pull up this post on X. This was posted again by FBI Director Kash Patel just in the last hour. He says the perp downloaded a document with a list of DHS facilities. He conducted multiple searches of ballistics and looked up the Charlie Kirk shot video in the last 2 days leading up to the shooting. According to the FBI director here, the shooter also searched apps that track the presence of ICE agents. And listen to this. He says that there was a handwritten note that was recovered that said, quote, "Hopefully this will give ICE agents real terror to think, is there a sniper with AP rounds on the roof?" The FBI also released a picture of anti-ICE messages written on rounds that were found next to that shooter. Officials say this attack was a result of dangerous anti-ICE rhetoric.
Absolutely. This is what what the left has created. They have to own it. They claim, that they keep lying about Charlie being a hateful, spreading hate. And every time I've gone on social media and somebody says that, I give them a challenge. I say, show me one thing that Charlie Kirk ever said that was hateful.
Well, and again, knowing the guy personally, I never saw him as hateful at all. He just wanted to bring out the best in people. And sometimes that might look like aggressiveness, but it's not. It's what a father would do. And I think that Charlie was a great father, will always be a great father. But that's the kind of attitude that liberals don't like, that I should say leftists don't like. Because I want to give credence to some of those liberals who have been very positive and trying to bring themselves together with conservatives. That's great, but we do have a left-wing insurgency in this country, and this anti-ICE kid definitely proved it, that this is going to be a continuing problem.
Yep. All right. And by the way, this coward killed himself, so he's gone. He's gone, so he's not going to stand trial.
No.
Let's move on to this interesting story about U.S. fighter jets intercepting Russian warplanes near Alaska.
Take that.
Where is that coming from?
And thank you for joining us here on Live Now from Fox. We do have some breaking news that happened a little bit earlier today that we did want to get to you here on Live Now from Fox. As I put up this post here from Fox News, we are learning, according to the North American Aerospace Defense Command, also known as NORAD, the U.S. scrambled fighter jets and other aircraft to identify and intercept 4 Russian warplanes flying near Alaska today. It's the 3rd time in about a month and the 9th time this year that NORAD has reported such an incident involving Russian aircraft flying near Alaska. NORAD said in a statement issued earlier this morning that it detected and tracked 2 Russian bombers and 2 Russian fighter jets operating in the Alaskan Air Defense Identification Zone. A total of 9 U.S. aircraft, a command and control aircraft, 4 fighter jets, and 4 tanker planes scrambled to positively identify and intercept the Russian jets. The Russian aircraft remained in international airspace and did not enter American or Canadian sovereign airspace. Such Russian activity near Alaska occurs regularly and is not seen as a threat. However, the incident comes after President Trump said Tuesday he believed Ukraine could win back all territory lost to Russia, which is a shift from President Trump's calls for Kyiv to make concessions to end Russia's war in Ukraine. NATO warned Russia on Tuesday as well that it would use all means to defend against any further breaches of its airspace after the downing this month of Russian drones over Poland and Estonia's report of an intrusion by Russian fighter jets last week. President Trump also said on Tuesday NATO countries should shoot down Russian aircraft if they enter their airspace. Asked if the U.S. would back up NATO allies in a situation like that, President Trump said, quote, "It depends on the circumstance." Following a summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska last month, President Trump said he was arranging for direct talks between Putin and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. But Putin has shown no interest in meeting with Zelensky, and Moscow has only intensified its attacks on Ukraine.
Well, there you go.
Wow.
This is, Putin's a snake, man. But I guarantee you, I think he's overplaying his hand, and he's going to be regretting what he's pulling.
Oh, 100%. And this comes right off the heels of what's known as Zapad 2025, which is a huge military exercise that the Russians just did on the eastern borders of Poland. The eastern border is actually totally sealed off, which China is very upset about because now they can't run freight through Poland into Europe. So I think this is Russia trying to show a little backbone when they should be showing Putin the door because they're running out of oil big time. We're making huge oil deals all across the world, and I think they're feeling the squeeze. Yeah. I think this is their way of saying that they're feeling the squeeze.
Yep. So we'll see how that develops.
Good on President Trump, I want to say. I just wanted to say amazing foreign policy as always.
Yep. Let's shift over to your hometown.
Do we have to?
There's something going on there.
Now we turn to the latest on ICE operations in Chicago, where we've just learned that Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem is here in the Chicago area.
This as we are learning about increased ICE activity.
So ICE is taking Chicago by storm, removing astounding numbers of federal fugitives from its streets. And this is happening just as Chicago's radical mayor celebrated the supposed pullback of the National Guard, who's not coming. But meanwhile, ICE has been secretly gearing up for an enforcement blitz no American city has seen before, which means this could be the end of Chicago as we know it.
Leaders tell us dozens of people were detained in West Chicago with arrests happening at a grocery store and outside of an apartment complex. A video posted to a West Chicago Facebook group shows federal immigration agents pulling a driver from a car.
Crowds took over the Loop downtown overnight, and on the south side it was a street takeover. This is video from 26th and Western. A large crowd got together there waving large Mexican flags. You can see and hear the group blocking traffic, doing burnouts.
Jails and incarceration and law enforcement is a sickness that has not led to safe communities. I'm going to work hard every single day to protect the people who are caught up in.
What's calling me to be here today is the people that.
Spare me the bluster, Mr. Paper Tiger Mayor. You haven't got the, cojones to do anything.
What I just love is that was not in Pilsen, that was not in Cicero, that was not in Aurora. That was all like bougie, upper middle class, probably well-educated Hispanic kids that have no business speaking for the working class Hispanics who are loving this. Do you have any idea how many jobs have just opened up for the people who have been living in Chicago for the last 70 years of their families' lives? This is great. We're happy.
All right. Let's close out real quick because this is something that kind of caught my attention.
President Trump officially signing an executive order designating Antifa as a domestic terror organization, all as the White House aims to crack down on the sources funding the group.
President Trump has promised he will directly address the dark sources funding and supporting this domestic terrorism to finally restore order in our country.
Rico George Soros.
Okay, so this is a little long, so we can't play the whole thing. But here, what caught my attention about this story is it says an ex-Antifa member praises President Trump's latest move against his former group, saying it was a long time coming. So that's from a former Antifa member. So,
oh man, and we will have a lot more information for you guys about all this goings on.
Yep.
In order to protect yourselves.
We're up against the clock, so thank you for tuning in. We hope we informed you well tonight. And for those of you on the Central Committee, we'll see you Saturday. And we'll be back next week with a new edition of the Hispanic Patriot.
You won't want to miss it.
Subscribe, donate. Thank you. Good night. God bless America.